everyone, and welcome back to Nerds on Words, new in 2019. We took a little break at the end of last year to take care of some personal and business things, but now we are back at it again, ready to go, ready to do some reading, and to kind of dive into what is going on in literature, nerd literature specifically. If you don't know who I am, my name is Robert, and I also go by Bamfing Bob on Comic Crusaders and the Undercover Capes Network. And here with me today, we have two podcasters who are very excited to talk about this month's book. The first is a series regular, Tracy. How are you doing, Tracy?
I am all good, thank you. Happy to be regular.
Yes, well, it's better than being irregular, I suppose.
Totally.
If you are, see a doctor.
It's okay, I'm fine, I'm regular.
Okay, excellent. And also, for the first time here, we have a newer member to the Comic Crusaders family, David. How are you doing, David?
I'm doing great. Thanks. Excited to be here.
Good. So you do a lot of reading, David?
Oh yeah, I've read for decades. So all kinds of different nerd genres. I love to read. So
good. So hopefully it will be a great addition. And our co-host Brian couldn't make it. Hopefully he can jump in, but he's doing a lot of stuff, especially with his new radio show. The Pool List. He's doing a lot there, so that's kind of taking up a lot of his time. But we have a really good crew here today, and to kick off 2019, we're going to be discussing one of my favorite books for many years. It is the first of a series by Peter Cline that clashes superheroes with zombies, and that would be the X-Heroes book series. Now, first impressions, everyone, when you first got the premise of this book, were y'all excited about it? Concerned?
Well, as you guys know, I'm not the biggest fan of zombies. It's not really my genre, but I love superheroes. So I was excited to read something that would merge the two and see how they would do it. You know, the only kind of zombie books I enjoyed recently were the, boy on a bridge, girl with all the gifts kind of thing. So I was hoping for something like that mixed with my superheroes.
Yeah, because, I like The Walking Dead. That sort of thing, and we all know that I'm a huge superhero fan, so it was just kind of like a match made in heaven. What about you, David? Are you a zombie/superhero fan?
Well, I think Tracy has got to be my nerd twin or something, because we agree on so much. When I first heard the concept, I really gave an eye roll. I'm not a huge zombie genre fan as a general rule. I was at first, but with all the zombie things that have come out, it's just like, it's overwhelmed me. After I read it, I enjoyed the book, but yeah, at first I was not ready for it. As far as superheroes, yeah, I'm down for superheroes of all types, and the actual idea of mixing the two was interesting to me. But yeah, when I first thought about it, it was like another zombie book or something. I was like, I'm not sure. So,
all right, well, as a warning to everyone, this podcast will probably contain spoilers to the end, but since this book is about 8 years old, I think that a good spoiler warning is all we're going to need, and we can just kind of dive straight in. So if you want to read the book beforehand, go ahead and do that, and then come back to this pod. The general plot of this book is that it's set in Los Angeles, several years ago, and there is a world that is full of superheroes. By circumstance, random happenings, everyone got superpowers. Not everyone, but there was an emergence of superpowered people all at once. And around that same time, a zombie apocalypse broke out. And so it's a very strange mix-up between all of our heroes having to deal with the zombie apocalypse, as well as a rival gang, the South 17s, who also have access to superpowered beings. And it's a nice mashup between The Walking Dead, like I said, having communities during the zombie apocalypse trying to navigate this new world, as well as superhero beatdowns, as well as a lot of personal conflicts and things of that nature. So the specific plot we'll get into later, but for the heroes themselves, there's a lot of original heroes. David, you want to go through some of the heroes that you found the most interesting that pop up in this book?
Sure. I really liked Gorgon. I liked the name to start off with, and I thought that his powers match up with the name, which I always appreciate. I hate it when someone gives a superhero name and it has almost absolutely nothing to do with what their power set is. So I appreciated that, and I love the fact that it's kind of like I like it when you get that dual nature of superpowers. So it's a blessing and a curse. If he looks at anybody, like he couldn't look at, this is one of the spoilers, but another superhero that I liked was his girlfriend, and I can't remember her name off the top of my head.
Bonsai?
Yes, Bonsai. But you think about the fact that he couldn't look at her because, his power set, which is he drains people's energy through his eyes, he can't look at individuals unless he's going to drain their powers. And then his ability to take other superheroes' powers by looking at them was also interesting. So I really like Gorgon a lot. And then I love one of the central characters, which was St. George. He was great. I really enjoyed St. George, his power set, the visuals that the author gave me, of him floating in the air, and he could spit fire, so he's got like smoke curling around his head. Just really excellent. I enjoyed that.
The one thing about St. George is he wasn't always called St. George. He actually started out being called the Mighty Dragon. And that's because, he kind of has flight, super strength, durability, but he can also breathe fire, and no one knows why he got these powers or how he got these powers. But after the zombie apocalypse and he started taking on a more heroic role, he transitioned from being called the Mighty Dragon to St. George, which I thought was a nice... It's not impossible for heroes to change names. I mean, just look at characters like Kitty Pryde, Is
that not more to do with his with the lore between the dragon and St. George? Because St. George slew the dragon in English literature.
Sure.
So he was changing his old persona into who he became as this guy that's of not vengeance but of retribution. I think that's what it was more aimed at with the name change.
I think one of the chapters is actually titled that, St. George and the Dragon, or something like that. So
Yeah. What about you, Tracy? Were there any characters that haven't already been mentioned that you're like...
Stealth. She's a bitch. I love her.
I love Stealth. No, okay.
She's such a bitch. Oh my god. She's like, I'm so beautiful, so I'm going to keep my face hidden because I'm so intelligent and nobody would listen to me because I was so beautiful. And yet I wear this sexy outfit so that people can see still I'm beautiful, but I'm going to kick your ass.
Yeah. No, what I love about the character of Stealth is later books go into it. I've read the whole series, and I don't want to give spoilers for those in this particular one. Right? Mm-hmm. But there's a reason why in this book she says, well, I'm beautiful and I'm smart and I'm, and I have to stay shrouded. Right? Because, in this book it discusses that the person who is Stealth, she's a black woman, but she's essentially like, she's a Tyra Banks type. She's a beauty queen.
Yeah,
she won Miss Universe. She's a lingerie model, and she also has whole master's
many doctorates.
Yes, she's uber intelligent, and she's also a very fierce fighter. She's very physically fit, so she is an all around threat. She's essentially this universe's Batman.
Yeah.
But I love that they made this universe's Batman type character a stunningly beautiful female, and she takes no shit from nobody. So by keeping herself like masked, like people can see that she is clearly a physically fit, beautiful woman, but she doesn't get the whole the feedback like, oh well, I'm not taking you seriously because you're a woman, or well, you're too pretty to be smart, or any of those things. Like she avoids all that and takes charge, and I absolutely love Stealth.
Yeah, I think she kicks ass on so many levels, you know, and not in a, you know, in a feminist way in any way, shape, or form. It's just that she knows what she wants. You know, she's focus driven. You know what I mean? She knows what needs to be done. These are the things that need to be taken care of. This is how we need to kill the threat. This is how we need to deal with each other. And, you know, it's how she continuously pushes and pushes and pushes people. Really, she was my favorite thing about this book.
Yeah, and she's ahead of the game too. She always kind of sees how things are going to be going, and like I said, I've read later books, and that definitely gets put to the test. Her being able to see situations prior to them taking place.
What did you think, David? Did you like her at all as a character?
Oh yeah, I'd say she commands respect. You know, you meet different people. There are people who ask for respect. There's people who demand respect. And then there are people, you know, in real life who command respect because of their very nature and who they are and what they give off. And she was one of those characters. I mean, just everything about her was exquisite, you know, and so she commanded the respect of everyone around her, even the superheroes. You know, even though she might not be as strong as St. George, her ability to fight, her ability to calculate was just amazing. Yeah. The things that I loved about her character was the fact that, you know, I don't know if it's her super ability because I haven't read those other books.
Sorry about that. Those are
Who let the dogs out? Woof, woof.
Damn dogs.
She could calculate, you know, all of these things at one time and then come up with the optimum solution as far as, you know, fighting or in strategy. And, you know, but she does have, I think, you know, it was hard to tell because she's so gifted mentally, but I think she has some low level powers as far as endurance and strength as well. But yeah, she was just an amazing character.
One of the things about stealth, though, is that, like Batman, like, they're very clear that, you know, she's a normal person. She's just way better than you in every way possible.
Right.
You know, like, there's nothing superhuman, quote unquote, about her, but there's nothing normal either. Like, it's a very fine line between her having an ultimate advantage and her just being better than you.
Yeah, like there's a really cool passage where she's talking to one of the other people in charge about how to, you know, you need to take shots to the head, and then she's like, okay, she's gonna use these visual aids to sleight of hand so that people think she's sitting a certain way or moving a certain way, and then she reads people's body language, so she knows he's left or he's right-handed, so he's currently looking to the left, so she swings to the right so that the air in between her and him is blank, so it looks for a second like she shifted from one plane to another. And it was just, for me, it was brilliant to read her little mind games and how she used these ordinary things to, you know, make people believe she was more than what she is.
Right. Other characters that are interesting, like for me, like St. George is a really fun character. Don't get me wrong, because, you know, the whole bulletproofness and flying and stuff, but it's not real flying, but it's flying.
It's still flying.
Like I do love that about the character, and he's such a real relatable character. But for me, the other ones that are so interesting, there's Zap, which is
the kid in the wheelchair, yeah?
Yeah.
I love him.
3 Z's. Zap.
Yeah.
And that character, he's a pop culture buff, and he's wheelchair bound, but he was in an accident, and so now he can transform himself into somewhat of a supernova type energy that he can harness. So he keeps his shape as a person, even though he doesn't technically have to. But he can move at Mach 5. He can read radio signals, and he's just made out of red hot plasma, or not red hot, but I think he comes off as blue. But he's made out of like a hot plasma type substance, so that he burns through things, and it's just a very interesting thing. He's either wheelchair bound or he's bound to this plasmatic form. But he's a very jokey character. He comes in handy in a pinch.
He's pretty cool how he sees things as well. You know, he sees people on all spectrums.
And all sorts of different.
You can also see videos and.
What was that?
You can also see radio waves, and I thought it was interesting though, in that his power backfired in one instance because when he was first called into LA by Stealth, look to see how the plague was going, she asked him to look for sick people, and so he was looking on an infrared spectrum, and all of the zombies are cold, and so he couldn't see them. And so he went around and wasted all this time looking for sick people. And then when he noticed for the first time, and I think his normal vision, he saw 2 of the infected, then he realized his mistake. And then when he went and looked again, they realized the extent of how far this place had already gone in. I thought that was really interesting.
Right. It was good because he's seen one and almost missed the second. Because he's seen a guy, and that's amazing for for a superhero. You know, I almost missed it.
Yeah, no, I like that it shows the vulnerabilities of the characters, and one of the most vulnerable characters for me is Cerberus, who's the last main superhero that we haven't discussed. Cerberus is a young American woman. She's a mechanic. And she built a giant Iron Man. It's a large military-grade robotic suit that she sits in nonstop. She barely ever leaves it, so it's kind of like her comfort zone. And even though a lot of the heavy artillery has been taken off of the suit, it's still super strong, still moves. But Cerberus is a character that I feel a lot of people can relate to. Because, you know, after everything has happened and kind of crumbled in the outside world, kind of being in your safe space is something that a lot of people miss out on. You know, that is taken away from a lot of people in those sorts of situations. And so she just kind of becomes a hermit in her suit. And I think she has agoraphobia too.
I was about to say that. She has some kind of... she has this need for this safety net of her suit. And you see it a lot with superheroes that, you know, they become, in some way, you know, something has happened to cause them some kind of PTSD, and they rely heavily then on what they have around them, like Iron Man. She reminds me of that character.
Yes.
Yeah, like Ironheart almost. Like Ironheart before she became a thing.
Yeah.
But other secondary characters, I'm not going to go into too much detail because some of them become zombies, and some of them are, not as important, but they become important later, both in the book and in the series. But there's Kyrax, who's a demon, or is a man with a magical amulet, becomes a demon. He's been killed, and so now he's he's a zombie, and all zombies are called X's, ex-humans, ex-people. And so Kyrax is a part of the South 17's gang. Another one is Bonsai, who we briefly talked about, who is also a young Asian woman, and she has super speed, and she was in a relationship with Gorgon. There's Regenerator, who can heal himself and others, and there was an accident near the beginning of the zombie outbreak that he was bitten. And so, instead of being able to heal other people, his whole power set is dedicated to keeping his own sickness at bay. So he's essentially just, he's kind of castrated as far as being a superhero is concerned. All his powers are going towards just keeping him alive. There's the leader of the South 17th that we'll talk about during the plot. But there's also a character called Midnighter who can cut off electricity. And there's one called, I think it's not Gorilla Guy. It's the Awesome Ape over on the East Coast. We don't really know much about him, but I would love to read more about a character called Awesome Ape. And then there is a whole host of human characters that are in what is known as the Mount. And they are all supporting characters, and they're who the heroes are trying to keep alive. Right? So, Tracy, the plot of the book, you said that you're not really into, the zombie thing, but could you just kind of go through the plot of the story? You can give spoilers or not, but I think it's pretty much going to be a spoiler one because there's a lot to discuss.
Yeah, there's a lot to the book. Initially, we find out, it goes straight into the superheroes aspects and what happened, how this zombie apocalypse happened. There's a couple of backflashes, and then you come in, and then they realize that actually, it's not the main X virus that causes things, that it's an accumulation of bacteria that causes the virus to continue on, and it's how they deal with that, and then their interactions with each other as the virus takes hold of more and more people, and then with the gang coming in causing problems in LA, it's like, do you shoot non-infected people? But technically, are we all infected? That's it in a nutshell.
Right. Now, the one of the main plot points is in this particular book, because obviously the X virus and the zombie outbreak are the most pressing thing. But the South 17 gang, they have a bone to pick with Gorgon, because he ended up killing one of the members of the South 17s. And so they want revenge against Gorgon for doing that. And so they are sabotaging the group at the Mount, and the Mount is a fixture. It was in a Hollywood studio type big block, a huge area where all the movie studio sets are, and all these people kind of hold up because it's big, it's walled, it's protected, and so they
the Roddenberry building,
right,
right,
they all hold up there, and that's their base of operations. But the South 17s, they're trying to, take the resources. If anybody, reads or watches The Walking Dead, it's kind of almost like Negan's group. They want what others have, but more so, they want revenge against Gorgon. And so they put all these plots into place to try to sabotage them, to take them over, to kill them. And the main leader of the South 17s is a guy known as PZ, and he claims to be the first person who was infected by the zombie virus. And his power is he can mentally control zombies and kind of channel himself through them. And since there are several superheroes who are now ex-heroes, hence the title, roll credits, right? He can control these superheroes as well, and he uses them to his whims. So
he's an absolute douche.
He really is, because not only is he a leading gang member, but he has a bone to pick, and he's kind of high on the power, of being able to control the dead.
Yeah, he's got like little man syndrome, as I like to describe it.
It's funny you say, because Rodney, or PZ, he was part of what I thought was really good about the overarching plot of the book, and what annoyed me as well, because he gets infected. Well, since we're doing spoilers, the Regenerator turns out is the one who created this whole mess in the first place, because his wife was killed by a member of the 17s, I believe, was shot, and so he tries to bring her back to life. And I thought that was a wonderful bit of almost like social commentary, in that sometimes people You know, a lot of the best villains are people who have good intentions, but they don't think about the consequences of what they're doing. And so I enjoyed that part. But then his wife is the one that ended up infecting Rodney. And then Rodney all of a sudden gets these powers, and he actually grows bigger and stronger from controlling the zombies. You know, and all through the book, the author keeps going, you know, would title chapters then and go back and explain like little backstories on what was going on. And I kept waiting for that from Rodney. And instead, I just got the zombie who could control other zombies who's getting bigger. And he was cliche. And I didn't get any story on how did this happen? How did he find powers? You know, it was just all of a sudden, here's the big bad, go, you know? And so I was, I was a little annoyed by that.
But you do still get a picture of the character, even if you don't see exactly what happened. But yes, that is the huge spoiler in the book, is that Regenerator tries to use his powers to bring back his dead wife. And because of that, the dead begin walking again, and it backfires on him really hard. And he, at the end of the book, I'm going to make a confession here. I read about halfway through it. I've already read the book many years ago, but I read about halfway through it, and I didn't make it quite to the end. But I mean, I've read it before, so it still counts. But
totally counts.
Does Regenerator survive through the end of this, or does he end up like killing himself?
Oh, he survives. In fact, they try and kill him. Stealth shoots him in the head, and he comes back from that.
He won't die. Right.
And
so essentially, he's the cause of it. He caused everything, but
that's something that annoyed me. That's what annoyed me about the ending of the book as well, was this character is called Regenerator. Okay? Everybody knows his powers are keeping away the virus for himself, and that, helping other people be reborn, and he can't be shot, blah, blah, blah. Yet they all try and kill him. Why don't they just, bury him somewhere, or, put him in solitary, or, I just, couldn't understand how they thought it was okay to take this character and start trying to shoot him in the head.
Yeah, that's just a waste of bullets.
They did
and
that.
And they give out about that throughout the entire book, about wasting ammunition, so...
One of the things I love... my favorite female character in the book, by the way, is Cerberus. I really identify with her, and I enjoyed reading her and her personality and the way she's not me, but I understand her and her want to get out there and just kick some ass, and I really like Cerberus. And one of the things they mention at the end of the book is, they find out they can't kill Regenerator. They've got him locked up. And Cerberus is telling everybody they should just keep him locked up and just don't feed him. She just wants to starve him for eternity as punishment. And it's like, that's harsh, but look at what he did. He killed the world. So it's like,
right. And if you can't kill someone, then you can at least make their life hell. It's a lot of the things they do that to vampires a lot too. They'll nail them in a coffin, and then when they come out, they're starved. And so maybe they just do that to Regenerator. But overall, at the end when there's a huge fight scene, how would you describe the action sequences in this book? Because superheroes and comic books, they kind of hinge on how well the action fight scenes go. So zombies versus superheroes, or superheroes versus superheroes. How does it fare for you guys?
It was very Call of Duty for me.
How so?
It was very heavy on the I can't even describe it. It was the action sequences were just they were almost good, and then something would happen or be said, and it would just ruin the entire previous 4 pages of reading. I understand that they're in a war zone. I understand that it's post-apocalyptic zombie world, but some of the scenes between the human and superheroes, and the superhero and superheroes, it just was very forced and very shooter up game. material for me.
Oh, definitely. Sorry.
Okay.
No, I'm fine. I was trying to find some gauze.
You need to explain that to people, that it's not just some random thing you do.
I got a tooth pulled today, and a few fillings done. They got me in on short notice, and yeah, so my mouth is all numb, and I feel like I'm drooping.
Yep.
Uh,
So he's not just a weirdo who likes gauze in his hand, just so you know,
like,
everybody.
oh right, it's my comfort item.
But
But yeah, I really like the way he does his action sequences, but sometimes there are moments that kind of take you out of it. The big fights in the end, there's Gorgon versus PZ.
Mm-hmm.
There is the Mighty Dragon, aka St. George, against Kyrax.
Right.
And I mean, the Mighty Dragon is arguably the strongest character, but Gorgon, he since he steals life essences and powers, it's kind of like Rogue from the X-Men. It's like the more he pulls, the stronger he is. So
their actual powers as well. So like Rogue.
Right. So it's an interesting dynamic, and then there's just a lot of smaller heroes fighting all the different X's, including Cerberus, who has to take over one of the fights because one of our heroes falls.
Yeah.
We'll leave a little bit of non-spoilery stuff there.
Somebody survives, somebody doesn't.
Correct.
Can I put in 2 cents on the fights for a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
I saw that there were three fights at the end, because there was also Zap going after, was it Midnighter?
Yeah.
Yeah, Midnighter, because he had come in and taken all the energy and actually disabled one of our heroes because he had taken all the electricity out. And so those 3 fights, I think, run the gamut of how I felt about the fight scenes overall in the book. So going from, I'm going to say, best to worst, the one that was my favorite, I thought was the most well written as far as descriptive and done well, even though it was very comic booky, for lack of a better term, was the Mighty Dragon, St. George versus, was it Kyrax? Is that his name?
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that was incredibly well done, and it was back and forth. I was, on the edge of my eyes while I was reading, one, and it was very good, and I enjoyed that immensely, and I could see that really well in my mind's eye. The middle one was PZ versus Gorgon, and it was good, but I wanted more action. I don't know if that character Gorgon had the fighting skills to give it to me, but it was middling for me. It wasn't great. The one that I was disappointed with and was looking forward to the most was Zap versus Midnighter. And I think it's telling that we actually, when we first started talking about this topic, we left it off, because that's what I think the author did as well. He left it off. There's so much he could have done there as far as coordination and trying to find Midnighter and having Zap battle, because it's like that. And they were opposite. They had opposite powers. And I wish that had been expanded on a lot more, because I thought that had a lot of potential. But it was like Midnighter all of a sudden just made this appearance. We really didn't know much about him until then, and he was kind of like a plot point just to turn off the electricity. That's how I felt about it, and I was disappointed.
Right, and also Midnighter, you don't hear anything about him, and I think that was just a way for Peter Cline to make Zap relevant in this, because you can have a superpowered character and just like fry all the zombies and you win the day, right? Because Zap is the most powerful hero in this book.
Yep.
But they needed a way for him to have his time occupied, and so they're like, well, Midnighter, okay, go have fun, kids. Right?
Right.
Be out of the way while the real action's happening. But later in later books, Zap has much better, much more character development, more use of his powers. And so you get to see that in later books if that is something that you wanted to do. But the overall like fights in there, I think everyone gets to show off what they can do. And as I've been saying, later books shows off different elements of different characters, introduces a lot of new characters and their new powers. So it's a really good like balance for me. Biggest gripes in the books. Tracy, I know that you have a few.
It's a zombie book.
It's really all you need. If you're not a zombie book fan, then this isn't for you. But these zombies, they do generally follow your zombie template. Shoot them in the head, walk slowly, they're dead.
It's standard fare, you
right?
know.
Now,
and
granted,
to me, the superheroes were mediocre. But obviously it's a series, so they're going to progress, but it wouldn't be something like I won't be reading book 2.
Fair enough.
Because it's not for me. But if somebody was really into The Walking Dead and like their own superheroes and they like their little bit of shoot 'em ups, they're going to love this book.
Right. And actually, funny you should mention book 2 because it's called Expatriates, and it's about a military base. And so there's kind of a super soldier type thing that goes on, and that makes it a little different, a little bit more grounded superheroes, not so like high and mighty, kind of like Zap and stuff. It's a bit more grounded superheroes, so it's a bit more one-on-one. But the zombies, they do take a very simple concept, and he tries to put his own unique spin on what makes a zombie, how they got there, how to beat them, and I mean, it's okay. What about you, David? Any big major gripes that you haven't discussed yet?
I think for me, when I read this, I didn't know it was part of a series. You know, the first time I read it through, I actually read the book twice. I'm one of those that likes the world building, so I really appreciated that. But when I read it, I was like, I wish he had given me another 100 pages. And the reason I say that is because I was like, there are a lot of things I wish that he had expanded on, and maybe he does that in later on in the series. And so when I was talking, a lot of the stuff, like the stuff with PZ, it's like I want to know more about certain characters. And so it annoys me sometimes when I read not just this book, but all sorts of different books or even comic books, when people give me something and say, just accept it. And I can and enjoy it, but there are times when I'm like, it's too central to the story, and I want that more detail. And so that was my biggest gripe with this book is like, I wanted more detail to add on to what I thought was a good world building and concept. And he got me to enjoy a superhero zombie book, which should say something positive for him, because like Tracy, I'm not a big zombie fan anymore. So
right, but it's just that it's that pairing of, what would happen if superheroes were in the zombie apocalypse. Now, obviously, you have things like Marvel zombies and things like that where you get it, but these are all original characters, and he makes his own story with it. And my biggest gripe
were interesting. So I have to give him credit for that. I thought the world was interesting, and I thought the characters were interesting,
and also you mentioned that you live in the Los Angeles area, correct?
Yes, I do, which was creepy. So it was creepy as hell. So I'm reading about it. I'm reading about places that I used to drive by, places I go to lunch at, places I work, So they're like checking out a place I worked at, and I'm like, oh, great. So
you're looking at them going, is there really zombies in there?
Yeah, it was really well done. You could tell that, I don't know if he lives in LA. I don't know that much about the author.
He does live in LA.
Yeah, he knows the city, and he wrote the city, and even the 17s and everything, and the way he wrote about that part of the city. If you're from Southern California and are, and get out and know about gang culture and what's going on. Yeah, he wrote it well. So it's authentic. And I appreciated that. I really did like that a lot. And I was like, read like LA. So.
He also did a lot of stuff in the movie business, which is why I think he set the novel in a movie studio, because he knows that they're fortified and stuff, but he has experience in movies. So that kind of also lends to the way that he stayed in his lane on this book. Like, even though there's a lot of outrageous things that happen, he didn't be like, oh, and I'm gonna have it set in a place I've never been to, doing something I've never done. Like, he tries.
And I've been to Paramount Studios in that whole area, and he nailed it. So it was really good there, and it is weird driving through that area of town, Burbank and up there where the studios are. It's like a bunch of mini enclaves. It's really strange.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's all sorts of different towns kind of bundled into one.
Yeah.
My biggest gripe on this book, and I didn't notice it the first time I read through, but this time I kind of did, is this was written probably 10 years ago, like obviously published 8, but it was probably written 10 years ago. And you can tell by the language and the way his books have evolved, at least, that the things he says sometimes regarding women, they wouldn't fly as well today. The way that he speaks,
the way he describes his women, is that what you mean?
Exactly. It'll be from a woman's perspective, and he'll be like, my non-existent breasts. It's like
my voluptuous buttocks. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, or like from a man, he'd be like, God, I can almost see her through that thing, what I wouldn't do, Yeah,
I can see her nipples through that top. It's like she's wearing body paint.
Exactly. And like, when I was 21 and I read this for the first time, I was like, man, this guy is awesome, right? Thinking, oh, cool. But then as I reread it, I'm like, oh, that's a little sexist, right?
What it is. And we've had this conversation, and it's a big reason why we had to take some time off as well. Yeah. You cannot judge books by that of 10 years old at today's standards. People wrote differently. Articles were written differently. People's mindsets were different. We have a whole new generation of people who are just too sensitive. And I'm putting that out there as a very strong female. There are too many sensitive PC people. This guy wrote this back when he wrote it. It's hilariously funny the way he's describing these women. And if you take that personally, then, that's sad.
No, and it's such a fun book to read. Like, and the thing is, like, reading through it, it's like, oh, well, you know that you're not as well endowed as your 14-year-old sister, right? But is that something that someone would really include in a conversation with their parents, right?
Never.
Right.
But it's like if we picked up any James Bond book now, if we picked any of the original James Bond books up now, and we read them,
you'd be shocked.
You know what I mean? That it's not only sexist. There's so many other things going on in them. So you can't judge things on today's societal standards. You just have to pick things up, and if you like it and you enjoy it, you do. And if you don't, you put it down. You don't give out about it. You just read something else that you like.
Exactly. See, I enjoyed it. Like, don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed it. But just like, it's things that I've picked up on after kind of being schooled in things in the last few years, right? About being told about things like the male gaze and inherent bias towards men and things like that. Like Peter Cline, I've met him and he's a really cool guy. I've interviewed him, met him in person in San Diego. I mean, he's a really cool guy. But from his male perspective, he's not thinking, oh, well, I have to cater to all the women who might be offended because I said boob, right? He just writes his book the way he wants to write it, and a lot of people have enjoyed it, including myself.
I think the end of the day is, as a writer, as a female writer, as a person in her 30s and late 30s to boot, I write the way I want to write. If I'm specifically catering for a genre or an audience, I will do that in a particular book. But I'm not going to cater for everybody's taste. Not everybody's going to enjoy reading what I write. And that goes for any writer out there. And it's the same thing. If you don't like it, put it down and read something else.
I hear
Plus,
you.
I've also noticed that, like you were talking about the conversations between women. Well, one of the things I think we have to recognize as well is that all women aren't the same. It's like I live in a house, my son is at school now, but I have a wife and two daughters, and their friends come over, and I overhear some of their conversations sometimes, and I'm retreating, because I'm like, holy cow, the way that they talk about, very frankly, about things. So you never know, as I have female friends as well, and they talk about a whole range of topics where when I hear it, I'm like, oh my Lord, it's like me and my guy friends don't talk about what's going on with our bodies that way, but they're very comfortable talking about it, and more power to them. So it's all so.
But if you were involved in that conversation yourself, it's something that they wouldn't be talking about. But because they're they're talking to each other, it's a little bit different.
That's not only with their friends. Yes, with my daughters, I'm lucky enough that I have a very good relationship with them that I can talk about them. But I have to tell you, it's taken. My oldest daughter's 16, so it's taken
16 years.
to get to that point. So.
Yeah.
But would you be upset if your daughter read this book? Would you think that your daughter would find it offensive?
No, I think she'd feel empowered by characters like Stealth and Cerberus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
And even the
same.
Do what?
Would both of you feel the same way?
David?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think that, and I think my daughters understand that. Not that that guys should be jerks, and I'm not saying that at all. But I think my daughters understand that, if Stealth comes out wearing a skin tight bodysuit, guys are going to have some thoughts going through their head. So
yeah.
I don't think that that's a surprise. So I understand that we are more
PC,
mindful.
Yeah, mindful of what's going on, but it's a fact of the matter. So. I think they understand that. I think my wife and I have trained them and guys well enough for that. So.
But so overall, this the book very zombie superhero heavy, kind of ties The Walking Dead in with like an Avengers type team. Overall, on a scale of 1 to 10, David, what would you give this book?
I am going to give it a 7. Yep, I think a good 7. It's between a 7 and a 6.5. So I enjoyed it. There are some things that I think are flawed with it, but overall, it's a good book. And if someone was looking for something like this, I would recommend it to them. So
very well. What about you, Tracy?
I was going to say 5.5 to 6. As a book in itself, it's quite well written in a lot of aspects, and then there are parts of it that let it down. And the reason why I just have it marked middle of ground is because it's not my kind of thing. So, but if it's somebody else's, they're gonna love it.
Right, and because of my background and my taste, I'd give it an 8 or an 8.5, just because it really appeals to me. And having read the others in the series and seeing how his writing has improved and how the characters have progressed, I look back at this book as a nice starting point for something that I enjoy versus just taking it for what it is.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of hard for me to isolate it because I know about, Captain Freedom and, all these other characters that pop up. So yeah, I think the average of the 3 scores is about a 7 or so, right? 6, 7, 8, or 5.5, 7, 8.5. It all averages at about a 7 out of 10. So this book, it's enjoyable. It's worth a read in my opinion. But it may not be your genre or your style. But I honestly think that this is something that would translate to the big screen quite well. It would have mass appeal.
Yeah, you could definitely see them making it into another kind of Hunger Games, Divergent kind of movie.
Exactly, because, the zombie kick kind of died a little bit. It was huge for a while. And this book dropped right as that zombie fad really kicked in the 2010s. And superheroes never gone out of style. I mean, they're doing as well as ever. So if this was to be translated to film in some way, whether that be the movies or television or Netflix or something,
it's definitely a movie book. It's not a TV show book.
Right. But say it was going to be made into a movie, I could see how that would spark interest for a lot of people who are kind of tired of Marvel versus DC. It would give them a different option to enjoy a superhero movie without having to take a side.
And it's got some good, strong female characters in it, which I think a lot of people are looking for from superhero movies in general. And I've advocated for some other books that I really like that I thought would be good movies that have some good, strong female characters in them as well. I think it would translate well to the big screen.
Mm-hmm. Also, because we're wrapping this up, but I wanted to mention that he also writes a lot of other science fiction stuff, not just the superhero versus zombie stuff, and I highly recommend it. His first book in that series, or not series, but in that kind of universe is called 14, and it's about a house that opens dimensions to another universe, or an apartment building, rather. And then another book called The Fold is all about, teleportation and, where you go when you teleport. And his latest one was, it's called Paradox Bound, and it's a time travel book.
So he actually does have a type of book that he writes.
Yes. No, because he actually has two separate things that he works on. He works on ex-hero stuff, superheroes versus zombies, and then he has this science fiction-y side of things.
This time travel, space jumping paradox, yeah.
Right. No, and it's he also channels kind of a Lovecraftian thing, right? Like spaghetti monsters and that sort of shit. It's really cool. It's cool stuff.
That kind of shit.
I think I've read almost every book that he's done, and I will say,
you're a total fanboy then, right?
Do what?
You're a total fanboy.
I think I've been disappointed in maybe one of his books, but yeah, I'm a huge Cline's fan, and I'm just glad that we got to cover it for the podcast. Next time, I'm not sure who all is going to be joining me and what it's going to be, but I believe we're going to be covering Steelheart by Brandon Sanderson.
Woohoo!
Brandon Sanderson is a science fiction hero. He's written a lot of stuff, a lot of different genres, as well as being a teacher at BYU for writing fiction. So he's kind of an expert in it, and you can see a lot of his books in the science fiction section at your local bookstore. But Steelheart is the first of, I think it's called the Reckoner series, and that's his superhero stuff. So I'm going to stay on the superhero theme, and we're going to read Steelheart by Brandon Sanderson. Do that for us this month, and we can meet back at the end of February and discuss superheroes by a completely different author.
Same bat time, same bat channel.
Roughly.
Yeah.
All right. So, to sign off, thank you all very much for joining us. I really appreciate you two reading and talking it through with me, and hopefully we get to talk later, whether that's next month or sometime in the near future.
Sounds good.
All right.
It's date.
I will not see you next month. All right. That's for Nerds on Words. Keep reading and stay nerdy. Bye, everybody.